Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back. Welcome back to another PorscheCooled Podcast, the podcast where we chat about, talk about, mumble about sometimes, I guess, all things Porsche. Steve's going to be here in a second. Steve is my co-host on this podcast. Steve is coming all the way from Australia. If this is the first time you've heard the podcast, my name is Michael Barth. I'm usually in Bahrain. That's where I live at the moment, but at the moment I'm just in London for a little bit. So this is coming out of London. It's, well, I'll let you guys know. I'm recording this on a Wednesday. It's actually Wednesday morning. It's almost 8 o'clock in the morning. Steve is going to be on the line from Australia. And in Australia, it's about, I don't know, was it 7 p.m.? 7 p.m., I think it is. So we're going to get Steve. We're going to talk about all things Porsche. We're going to continue on from our podcast last week about Porsche hunting, buying a Porsche, our thoughts. But anyway, let me get Steve and let's start talking all things Porsche. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you didn't hear Steve swearing then. He was just swearing, but you probably just missed it. Welcome back to the PorscheCooled Podcast. That's Steve in the background. Hi, Steve.
Hi, mate. How you going?
I'm well. I'm just double checking. I'm actually recording in all the fun of it. Yes, I am. I am recording.
Can you hear my daughter in the background?
That's Steve's daughter. She's happy. She's not sad. She's happy. That's why she's crying. Because she's
happy from her beating.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Where are we? PorscheCooled Podcast, episode 56, Steve. Episode 56. Do you believe that?
I do.
You do?
Never doubted it for a second.
Yeah, we're getting up there, aren't we? Two a week we've been doing. If you haven't been watching the podcast, you don't watch them. If you haven't been listening to the podcast, we've actually been doing 2 a week for quite some time now. Actually, I can tell you exactly how long. We're up to number 10 of owner stories. And so what's that? 10 weeks? 10 weeks we've been doing 2 episodes a week. Just on that, actually, I'm going to jump forward on my list. I've got a little bit of list here, a reminder list to keep me on track so I don't forget things I want to talk about. But let's just go to the owner stories, because the owner stories, Steve, went up on Tuesday again.
Yep, I listened. It was good.
It's good, huh? It was good.
Yeah. What's the guy's name? Greg?
Greg is, if you haven't listened to it already, it's Greg. Greg is from New Jersey in the US. And Greg has a Speed Yellow 996. And I know you're a fan of Speed Yellow, Steve.
Yeah. Remember I tried to talk you into the Speed Yellow 996 GT3 at one point?
Yeah, I remember that.
There was one at Autohouse?
Yep.
There was a 997 GT3 in Speed Yellow. I also tried to talk you into that.
I think a turbo came up as well at one stage. I think there was a 996 turbo doing the rounds as well on Australia there for a bit. Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I think so. But admittedly, when I was listening to your chat with Greg, I was thinking, I wonder if it's the same in the States or the UK. But I really honestly do reckon, and I think I may have asked Scott at Autohouse this, but I suspect that yellow is a very polarizing color and is harder to sell. I think it sits for longer.
Yeah, and I think I asked Greg that question. Was that the reason? Because he said he got a reasonably good price for it, I think.
That's right.
And I said that. Is that the reason why? Because the dealer just underestimates the color, or the color is a little bit, people are a little bit scared of colors. If you go on Greg's website, which is First Flat 6, where he helps, basically he's turned his passion into helping other people find their 996, 997. Predominantly, that's what he likes to help people with. Manual, that's why his Instagram, if you look at his Instagram, which is First Flat 6 as well, which I said in the podcast, that's the kind of cars he focuses on. But I think it's great. I mean, he's turned his interest with the 996 generation and the 997 generation into something that can be, a business. And I think that's a great thing. And I think that's helping others in the Porsche community. That's kind of what we're all doing. I guess we're kind of doing it as well, just chatting to people. I get so many comments, and I'm sure I've said this to you, Steve. I get so many comments that people said that the podcast that we do has really helped people during this year, during the pandemic. Yeah, sure. And a lot of people have found us because they've listened to us during the pandemic, and it's been. And I guess that's what it is. It's just, we're all sort of reconnect. We're connecting with each other and keeping each other afloat, I guess. And I guess, things like this podcast and other podcasts, that's what it is. You know what I mean?
I'm assuming, pretend you were in Sydney too. Like, I'm assuming if you were with your car, And at first you were kind of doing more YouTube vids. Be a lot harder to kind of make kind of good video content during the pandemic, right?
Yeah, I think so. Unless you're just sitting in the car by yourself talking.
Yeah. Much harder to kind of... and it's obviously more time consuming as well.
It doesn't seem to have stopped a lot of YouTubers, though. I don't understand. Even like during this current lockdown in the UK, I mean, those, I'm not going to mention the names, but the well-known YouTubers from the UK, they're just still making videos. So I guess they class themselves as an essential business. I don't know how that could be an essential business, but I guess that's what they do. But... and excuse my voice this morning, I've actually got a really croaky throat. And as I just said to Steve off recording, you always worry when you get a sore throat now that you got corona. Like, it's really bad, isn't it? As soon as you get any kind of like feel a bit ill.
Can I get the stick, mate?
You know?
Can I get the stick?
And then when I heard Lewis Hamilton is positive from being in Bahrain, I thought, he didn't get it from Bahrain, did he? But apparently he didn't get it from Bahrain. He was in contact with someone before Bahrain, I think it said. But, coronavirus, you get tested 2 or 3 times and you're negative and then you're positive. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a weird thing. But anyway, back to Greg's story. I think Greg's story is really good. So thank you, Greg, for being on that. And if you haven't listened to it already, like I said, it's the last episode, not this episode, it's the episode before, PorscheCooled owner stories that we do every week with Porsche owners around the world. I've had Steve, I've actually had about 3 people reach out to me in the past week. And I'm tied up. What I'm trying to do is I'm tying up quite a lot of recordings over the next week so that we can give all the listeners, a PorscheCooled owner stories going into December, into January. We will try and keep this podcast going over the break, but we'll see how we go with Steve with his family
You're
time.
like Father Christmas, man.
Yeah, I know. So at the moment, I can get us to the end of December with owner stories. So with the people I've organised, and some good ones coming up. I'm not going to give it away. I just told Steve who one of them is going to be. The one I'm recording tomorrow morning with a guy from New Zealand, and I think that's going to be a really interesting one. So that's happening, and then there's another one on Friday morning I'm doing as well. So I'm doing two in the next couple of days. Early starts for me though because of the time zone difference here in the UK. All right.
Nice.
Patreon, no shout-outs this week, no new members. It's very sad. It makes me upset.
Don't cry, mate.
PorscheCooled Exclusive, I'm just going to give a little plug because we don't have ads on this podcast, so I guess this is not an ad. This is just asking for support. If you want to support the podcast, if you want to help us keep chatting, if you want to help us upgrade our equipment, you just go over to PorscheCooled on Patreon. You can go to Patreon, do a search for PorscheCooled Podcast or PorscheCooled. It comes up straight away. Or you just go, patreon.com/PorscheCooled. So if you go over there, it's pretty easy, and you can join PorscheCooled Exclusive and you get certain benefits and things like that, but mainly just to help support us keep talking. We had another podcast review during the week, Steve, which is really great. So I want to thank you to 6 Speed GP, who I think I know who it is, and I'm not going to say, but I'm pretty sure I know who it is. So thank you for that. Thanks for giving the review of the podcast. All the reviews that we get on Apple, ratings, if you don't want to write a review, you just give us a rating. Like I said, it helps us get seen, especially in the US where there's a really very competitive podcast market. So it helps us push us up the charts in the US so that you guys, other guys like-minded people like us who love Porsche can get to experience the podcast as well. What else, Steve?
Don't know, mate. You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. You're just sitting there. You're just waiting for me to finish.
Why don't I just sit here for the next hour? And that's what I usually do in client meetings.
What was I going to say? Oh, I just want to update about last week, the slate grey, back to my 912 passion, my 912 search. I found something really interesting, actually, about 912s, but about the price compared to other cars, and I want to say it in a second. But the slate grey one that was for sale in the UK, it literally lasted, 4 days. I mean, I had a notification and it came up that it was listed because I have a notification from that site. And it's gone already. And it just shows you the power of, and it was £59,000, so it's not cheap. But
it was cheap for a 912, I think you said?
It was cheap because it was nut and bolt restoration. It was fully restored. You know what I mean? So when you think about it that way, £59,000, it was fully restored. And I guess it shows that there are a lot of people who don't want to mess around. They want the classic. I guess it's like getting a 911, but if you've got a 911T or a 911E, of that same era, fully restored, it's going to cost you probably, twice or three times as much. You know what I mean? So I guess in that respect,
a narrower kind of group prospective clients, though.
I mean, it was a lovely
higher up you
example,
go.
though. Yeah, but it was a lovely example because that slate grey is such a popular color. You know what I mean? And also, like I said, there was one at Revival 912, or it still is, for 79,000, 20,000 pounds more. So anyway, that went.
Yep.
Just an update on values. So things are selling reasonably quickly. And it's quite interesting because another one came up, Steve, on, what is it called? Beverly Hills Car Club. A 65 came up. A 65 is the 3 gauge, and it's painted dash behind the 3 gauges. So it's like the 356 dash in a way. That's only just come up in Togo Brown, which I think Togo Brown is scarier than sepia brown. It's a bit of a scary color.
Like shit?
Yeah, it's a little bit, I find it a little bit scary. It scared me when I looked at it last night. Fawn interior, a Togo Brown fawn interior. It doesn't really sell it to you. But that's 54,000, that's US, so it's 54,000 US. And that's not restored, but apparently it's a sought after example. But I remember that, and I'm just getting onto values again, how quickly they change with Porsche, how you really, our thing where we keep saying you can't wait. I worry about this thing waiting for whatever you're looking for. Because the 912 3 gauge was about 39 to 45, and a couple came up when I first started looking on Beverly Hills Car Club in March, April, and they were in green. There was a green one, which was immaculate. I think it was 45, the green one. So even this, this one doesn't look as good a condition, and this one, he's got a 54. So you can see the prices even with him. And he sells a lot of cars that are rusted and, they need work. You know what I mean? Like he just literally finds them and sells them.
So is this 3 gauge that's kind of body painted kind of cluster thing, is that less or more desirable?
Depends who you talk to. I mean, I prefer the 5 gauge personally because I like how it looks more like the 911. I don't think the 911 ever had 3 gauge, did it?
No.
Yeah, so
the 5.
Yeah, so the very first 912s, the 65s, were basically this. They basically had a detuned or tuned 356 engine. Detuned Super 90 engine, I think, is in the 912, the original 912. So it wasn't the Super 90, it wasn't the 90 horsepower one. It was slightly detuned. But it wasn't the base 60 horsepower engine that was in the 356. It was a slightly in-between one they put in the 912. And then the 3 gauge, which, I'm not a big fan of it. I don't really like the painted look. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I did see a 5 gauge one the other day too, Steve, that was actually painted behind the dials. I don't know if that was a standard option or an extra option. It was actually painted body color behind the dials. That's the one thing I really liked about Greg's 996, actually, which I said that I don't know what it is. Yeah, the 996, out of all the models, when that center console is painted in the 996, it really does just transform the car, don't you think, inside?
Yeah. I mean, aesthetics is obviously very subjective, but it's probably just because there's a lot of plastics in the 996 and they're not the greatest quality. It's sort of a little bit shinier rather than that sort of soft touch thing. So
yeah,
I reckon it's probably something to do with that. I reckon they look good in 997s as well. I know when you've been sort of toying with the idea of, playing and tweaking your 997, I think I've always sort of said to you, I reckon a silver center console, painted console would look really good in your car.
I'm not against it, actually, because as a cost exercise, it's obviously, and I did get a quote from Linus in the UK for the console. It was quite expensive once you had the part into it. If you had to get a part, but getting it painted, going to a good paint shop, getting the center console done in Arctic silver, it's not a bad idea. I always worry about how it's going to wear. Like if I'm going to bash something against it, it's going to chip the paint off and it's going to look tacky.
Same as your the outside sort of bodywork. You're gonna have to kind of hit it pretty hard.
Yeah. So I think if you could find a cheap console, I'd still like to have my original console. But if you could find a cheap one and then get it sprayed, I don't know how much.
Ages ago.
Yeah, I know you found one. Steve's always good at. Yeah, I know Steve always finds these really cheap parts, and I always ignore them. Onto parts though. I did find the dashboard end parts Now,
yeah.
anyone listening to the podcast, do not go to eBay and search for these because I've still got them and there's only 2 left and I don't want anyone to buy them.
You do understand the concept of the World Wide Web, don't you?
Excuse me. So they're the 2 dashboard ends because you got me into the thing, maybe I should get the dashboard ends done. And then I thought, well, I don't have a leather dash. I told Tasha about it and she looked at me like, my wife, and she looked at me like I was a bit crazy. Like, why would you want just the ends when you don't see them? But then I thought, oh, maybe it does work. And then I found the part on eBay and they're only £10 each for the ends.
Just get it.
And then I was going to send them to
£10.
I was going to send them to the guy in the UK, because it's from this seller. Actually is quite a good seller. He's in the UK. He's got a name which is based on an 80s band, a guy who was a lead singer in a 1980s band. That's the name of his eBay channel, which is eBay account. I'm not going to give it away because someone will go and buy these parts. But he actually has a lot of other Porsche parts there for 997.
I'm thinking Boy George.
Yeah, no. Starts with Steve. Steve is the first word, believe it or not.
Right.
So I was looking at those, Steve. I was thinking about maybe I'd get that. So I emailed the guy in the UK, asked him what's happening with my sunroof, leather sunroof part, and asked him how much it'd cost for that. I'm still waiting. It hasn't been a week yet, so wait for a week, and I'll eventually get the thing. The good news is the part that went to me by mistake from that he sent to me by mistake and didn't send my part, that's actually arrived in the UK now. It's taken so long. It's like been 3 weeks. So that arrived at, they tried to deliver that to Nick yesterday. I don't know what Nick was doing. Nick wasn't home apparently. The typical mailman thing. Oh, we tried to buzz and you weren't home. I've been home all day. I mean, that happens in Australia all the time. At my place in Sydney, every time there's a delivery, it's like, I'm watching it, and then it goes, attempted delivery, and it's like, not home. It's like, what do you mean, not home?
I've just taken to having everything delivered to my parents because they're retired and they're home, and where they live, the mailman can drop something off like on the doorstep and no one's going to nick it. So it's like, yeah, you know what, it's just easier.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. That's a really good idea. All right, so that's about it. I just want to talk about, I'm not going to talk about Ferrari because I don't want to upset people, but I don't have a problem with Ferraris, 80s Ferraris. You know what I mean? But I was looking at the 912s and I thought, how does an 80s Ferrari compare in price to a 912? And I was a bit surprised, Steve.
Cheaper?
The 328 GTS, for example, if you look at Bring a Trailer and you look at the past sales, and I was looking at this last night to talk about this today, they're somewhere around 45 to 55,000 US dollars.
What's Matt Farah's?
328 GTS.
Yeah, right. Because he sort of said on his whatever platform at some point that the equivalent 80s Carrera is significantly more expensive, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. I'm just trying to do a conversion now to see what it is in pounds because I can't remember what Okay, sorry, we just had a technical difficulty there, but we're back.
Michael's calculator died.
Yeah, something happened. The 328 GTS is 45 to 55,000 US dollars. There's some. Obviously, there's some that are higher. So when you think about the one I just said, the 912 that just came up, the 3 gauge, that's 54,000 US. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep.
So compared to what it just shows you the value of Porsches, Steve. I'm lifting my hands up and down to Steve here, but the value of Porsches is quite strong. You know what I mean? Like
Michael's juggling for everyone out there. Yeah,
you forget how, and I guess something like a 328 or an 80s Ferrari, I would compare it to the SC, to the 911 SC, even though the SC is finished in 83. I think it was 78 or 79 to 83. But I guess the 3.2 Carrera, which is like what your uncle used to have, that's what, 84, is it? 84 to 80?
No, his was 86 or 87, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was 86 onwards. It was 86 onwards.
Yeah, I think 3.2 Carrera, was 84, 85 in the US to about 89. So 90 is when the 6.4 came out, right? The 964 came out.
89, yep.
So when you compare it to those prices, it's interesting how strong the value of Porsches are. You know what I mean? Because, that Ferrari that 328 GTS that Matt Farah bought is of all the Ferraris, is a very reliable Ferrari. And if you listen to Matt Farah's podcast, you've heard him ramble on about the fact that you don't have to drop the engine to do the belt. So you just go in through the wheel arch.
But I wonder, in a straight, I don't know, like don't call it 1 year, call it like a 5-year ownership proposition between the two kind of cars, surely a Ferrari is going to be a hell of a lot more expensive to maintain, like parts and labour and everything would.
I think so.
Would it not be?
I think so. I mean, when you read anything about this, and we're talking about this today because we are talking about buying Porsches, and this is the continuation from last week's podcast. So we're kind of getting into that. If you're wondering why we're talking about Ferrari, yeah, no, but we're talking about Ferrari because it is. You know, when you're looking for a car and you're looking for a 911, Steve, you're looking at options too. You might think, you know, even if you're buying a new 911, maybe I want the Vantage V8, maybe I want the, you know, maybe I want a Ferrari instead of a 911 Carrera. So you got to look at values, and people weigh these things up. But I think you're right. I think even though they say the maintenance on a 328 GTS is not that much, it could. So
you're talking comparatively to other Ferraris as opposed to.
Yeah, I think they always they compare it to the 308. When I looked into this a little bit, they compare it to the 308 and they compare it to the 360 Modena.
Or a 355, 355.
Yeah, 355
sounds like it's horrendous.
Yeah, and if you're into Ferraris, the 355 Ferrari is apparently the worst for costs. Some people say.
But it's beautiful as all hell.
It's beautiful, though. And I did read that on Ferrari Chat that people were saying that people who have owned both said, yes, over a 4-year period, it will definitely cost you more. It will cost you more to hone. But it's interesting, and I will actually give it away because I do want to give it away because I'm going to ask the person that's coming on the podcast. I have a guest coming on PorscheCooled Owner Stories who I'm recording tomorrow who actually does own 2 Porsches, and he does own a 328 GTS. So I might actually just pick his brain about that, about his running costs actually, and just see what he thinks about it, if it is comparable or not. It would be interesting to see. So that's that. Something I wanted to tell you, Steve. What was it? And I haven't checked my Instagram this morning, so I don't know whether this was a mistake or a typo from Porsche. But Craig, who was on Owner Stories, Craig who has got the 997, P 997.1, P997.1.
Oh, yeah.
Similar to my Instagram, Craig, with the blue one.
Yep.
It was a good story. Craig sent me a message and said, you know, because he's been after the tire pressure sticker on the inside of his door jamb. And I told him to contact Carbone, because I know Carbone make all those stickers. They don't necessarily have them on their site. His car had some respraying done, which he mentioned in the story, so he didn't have those stickers. And he also doesn't have the ones, I think, underneath the bonnet. So I gave him Joaquin's details, who I found on Renlist years ago, because I was missing one of those stickers from my book, and he made them for me.
They don't do those under bonnet ones on a 997, do they?
Yep. My 997 has the under bonnet. Yep, absolutely. 997 has the under bonnet, and it has it in the book. But the thing with these stickers, as you know, and Autohouse always, the guy at what's the name at Autohouse told me that
Chris.
People used to throw them away. Yeah, Chris was telling me people people would throw it away. They'd throw one away and put one in the bonnet, or they might put them in the book and underneath the bonnet. And some cars, like when he was doing 993s or something, I think it was, he said, you know, that sometimes they were just thrown away. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that important. So that's why there's some missing. Mine was actually missing the one from the manual, from the service book, which you know about.
Yep.
And I got Joaquin from Spain to fix it up. And Joaquin, I found through Renlist, and he's highly regarded on Renlist. If anyone wants the details, just send me a DM and I'll give them his details. He's still making them. 2 years later...
I'm looking at you strange because I'm still kind of trying to work out whether or not... I thought they were definitely the under-bonnet ones, which is sort of like one of the telltale signs of when you sort of check out a car.
Yeah.
I definitely know that they were kind of one of those things that everybody religiously kind of make sure that you've kind
Doesn't
of got
yours
on a
have
993. I thought in a 996 they did, but I thought they phased them out on 997s.
No. Nope.
It's still in the book, but I don't think they kind of stuck them on the underside of the bonnet. I don't know. Need somebody to kind of adjudicate.
I think you're wrong.
I think you're wrong too.
Well, mine's got it underneath the bonnet. Anyway, the story is, if you need someone to make those stickers up for you, I know that Carbone does them now as well, and I know there's an eBay seller I found on eBay, and they were really expensive. This guy in Spain is really good, and I passed it on to Craig because Craig was interested too. I'm not sure if Craig contacted Joaquin. I think it's Joaquin. I'm probably saying it incorrectly. But anyway, 2 years after the fact, I didn't even put I got one and I didn't even look at it. Before I left Sydney last January, I looked at it and it was incorrect. The number was incorrect.
That's handy.
Because I didn't even check it properly. I just got it, left it in the envelope and didn't even check it as I do. So I just sent a message to him. I sent an email to him and said, look, can you fix it up for me? Because I'll pay him. He actually did it for free. He actually sent it to me for free. Really nice guy. Really, really nice guy. But the twist of this story is Craig contacted Porsche South Sydney. I think it was Porsche South Sydney or one of the Porsche dealers in Sydney.
Yep.
This week, actually, because he sent me a message. And I'm not sure because he was going to recheck with him if it was a typo. And he wanted the tyre pressure placard sticker, which is on the door jamb, which I think is a black sticker. They quoted him $350 US. $350 Australian.
Yikes.
Yeah, $350 Australian. So Craig's point was, and I think I would think the same, and like I said, I haven't checked if this is a typo. Craig was saying, I have to check with them. Maybe they meant 35. But I have a funny feeling. 35 sounds too cheap for Porsche, so it probably is 350.
Yeah, I just ordered something for. That sounds extraordinary. What did I was helping my uncle out, so I reached out to Sarah, who I normally deal with at Porsche South Sydney, and I was just getting a cigarette lighter, which was missing for his 991.2.
Okay.
That was $50. So I thought that was
that's
a little
cheap.
bit dear, but
Really? I think that's cheap.
yeah,
For a cigarette lighter,
Yeah,
that makes that sticker sound really expensive. It must have been the
yeah.
wrong
I
price.
was just trying to give you a reference point, and I've got a couple of little plastic interior plugs. So while I had her there, I just sort of said, "Oh, can you grab these parts for me?" She didn't give me a price, but yeah.
Was that for your
expecting
uncle?
No, that bit was for me. Little plugs just for the inner door sill.
That's because we spoke about plugs last week, and I said how I had all my plugs replaced.
Yeah, there was also, like when you open your door near, how can I explain this in an audio thing? I can't. There's a little clear bit of sort of film that sits when you open your door where the latch is, where your door kind of goes to the latch, sort of right in front of your eyes.
Yeah.
That's kind of clear film. It's sort of like shaped like a little, like your finger kind of thing. It sits there. And I ordered that from South Sydney, and I can't remember what it was. I think it was like $14, which was insane.
Clear film?
Just like a little bit of, yeah.
What does the film do?
Nothing. I'm assuming it sort of stops a certain bit from rubbing at some point. And it was actually the second thing that I did. Remember you asked me the question when I picked up my car?
Yeah.
Because my car's white and you open the door and you can sort of see that thing and it gets quite yellow. So it looks pretty horrible, and I just kind of replaced it again. But
Right.
I thought that was pretty kind of rich for like a little bit of plastic film. But
So how was did you get so last week you're talking about those magnographic things, did they arrive?
they did.
Which I do know they arrived. I've seen them. Tell everyone, Steve. What do you think of them anyway? Are they any good?
So yeah, the magnographic wheel arches, you just got to make sure it's clean before you apply it, and it's also dry. It has some fairly clear instructions. I just put them on to kind of see what they look like, and I sent you some pics. Like I said in the previous thing, they're not exactly the same template as your existing clears because the bottom of your car kind of curls over and it needs a bit more of a flat surface to sit on.
Right, right. But the shape's okay.
The quality.
Though. It looks. I saw the picture. It looks similar.
It's where there's sort of tight corners or like they're curved corners on the actual template. It's not super clean, so could be a little bit better. But look, from a distance you'll never notice it. You'll never notice. I'll go for a drive this weekend. Might go for a drive with them on and see how they hold up, whether they actually stay on. But everything I read, like everybody sort of said, like there's no issue with it, they'll stay on. Like just don't apply them to your car when they're wet. And if the whole idea is that I can peel them off whenever I feel like it because I'm sick of the black kind of look, then it serves its purpose.
Yeah. Looks good. So how's the so your uncle's 911? He's going to get some paint correction done, you said?
Yeah, he was picking my brains about ceramic coatings and all that sort of stuff, and I just sort of said to him, "Look, I'm still in the dark ages. You know, I watch things, I read things, blah blah blah." And he was umming and ahhing, and then he sent me a thing sort of saying he's booked it in. He's found a guy. I looked up the guy that he was kind of sending it to, and he sounded like he knew what he's doing. So I'm really quite keen. Like the guys. Just in case, just to recap, my uncle's got a 991.2 Carrera S in midnight blue or night blue, and it's only got 8,800 kilometres. Paint looked pretty clean to me, but I think, you know, it sounds like it's just a bit of a rabbit hole because, you know, like if you're going to go and get the ceramic coating done, which is kind of what he wanted, you actually have to kind of make sure the paint's pretty schmick before you
corrected. Yeah,
you go and do all that stuff. And this is the same if you were going to apply PPF. So then you've got to pay like somebody to kind of spend like a day and a half, like, you know, doing the paint correction. And that's, to me, that's the bit where you kind of want to make sure that if somebody's, you know, taking something off your clear coat, that's actually kind of done properly. So
yeah.
Look, he's taken the plunge on a dark blue car. I'm sure it'll look amazing. Like it'll look glossy.
It's not a cheap job, though, is it, to get a paint correction and ceramic coating? I noticed on the site, I had a look at the site you told me about last week, Aussie Cozzy, and I went to that site because I was looking at the PPF, and he has prices on his site, I think. Yep. He does. Yeah,
that's not cheap either. And this guy that's working on my uncle's car, I'll talk about it more when it goes in. It's booked in just before Christmas, but like he does film as well, and I know like once you kind of start reading up on it, like there's lots of trains of thoughts about the whole thing, and some people kind of get their cars wrapped with film and then ceramic coated.
No, I had a look at Aussie Cozzy because he uses a G-Tech. Is it G-Techic or whatever it's called? That
I'm
ceramic
not sure
coating.
Which one he uses.
Yeah, I think it had that on there, and I think it was 600 Australian dollars to do it. And then I looked at the price of the stuff in the 100ml bottle or 50ml bottle, and obviously it's a lot cheaper, but you have to do it yourself. So I don't know how hard it is to do the coating on the whole paint yourself.
This is the conversation I was having with my uncle because my cousin, who's well into cars as well, did a do-it-yourself type thing. Like, you know, it looks like the sort of thing that I'd kind of have a crack at myself, but with my car specifically, it's more the paint correction that I'm not sure that I'd really want to kind of just go and sort of do that myself. And the other part of that conversation is, like, if you get your car looking that pristine and then you kind of get the ceramic coating or the PPF or whatever, maybe not so much the PPF, but I reckon it would just make me not want to drive my car quite so much because I would want it looking, you know, so pristine, particularly if I'd just spent, call it $2,000 to kind of get it to that spot.
To get it done,
and I don't really want to get to that point. I'd just rather enjoy my car and, you know, stick to old-fashioned, you know, wash and wax and, you know, and also because I kind of enjoy that sort of
it's fun.
Exercise. Yeah,
it's fun. It's relaxing. Let's go back to just quickly about your friend picked up his GT3.
Yep. So my mate,
happy.
I might get him. I might sort of propose that he see if he wants to chat to you on an owner story type thing. But long story short was that last Sunday he drove to Bathurst to pick it up. Met the kind of seller like more than halfway, I guess it was. Blah blah blah. So it's what's Bathurst? It's like a 3-hour drive.
Bathurst is about a 3.5 hour drive from Sydney. Yeah.
So he got to, I mean, you sort of hear things in the States where people kind of do that a lot, fly somewhere and then drive it home. He sent me a text and he said he was nervous beforehand, all that sort of stuff, understandably so, because he hadn't seen the car. I don't believe he'd driven a GT3 before.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And then he said that he was super happy with it, exceeded his expectations, all the things that I guess the way I feel about my car, or you've taken mine for a reasonable sort of spin.
Yep.
You know, he sort of mentioned the sound, the grip, all of that sort of stuff. The car was on Trofeo R's, like probably Trofeo R's, which are mega grippy tyres, and it's been really hot in Sydney it was 2 consecutive 40-degree days the other day. So
Did you say he's got 2 sets of wheels or 1 set of wheels then?
So the car he got was similar Carrera white to mine, same year I think, 2008 or 2007. Comfort spec, but the seller was an older guy apparently, and was very honest in his ad. Sort of said, yes, it's done, kind of track time. So it came with a racing seat because it otherwise had comfort seats, the standard comfort seats. Came with a racing seat, harness bar, extinguisher, spare set of wheels with the Trofeo R tyres.
What wheels were they? GT3 wheels?
No, aftermarket ones. I've seen the picture of it. They were black wheels, just sort of like a simple 5-spoke thing.
So how did he carry all that back? How did he get all that back to Sydney? If he
didn't. Yeah, he didn't. He drove it away with some of that stuff there, and the rest of it has to kind of be sent to him.
He has the proper spare seat though, the comfort seat, because I noticed it's got some racing seat in it. He's got both the original seats, right?
Yeah. He's got the comfort seats. Yep.
Yeah, I'd switch the seats out straight away. That's what I would do. Back to the comfort seats.
Yeah, look, I'm super keen to. We're catching up on Sunday. I'm going for a kind of a drive. So I hadn't spoken to this mate in a little while. I worked with him like a few years ago. Blah blah blah. But we're going to go for a little drive up north, like really early on Sunday morning. And
Not
no
south?
doubt I'll be. No, he's also into his sports bikes, so I think he's got like a bit of a favourite route of his own, which is sort of up Old Pack Highway way.
Oh, is this the guy that bought?
Kind of
is this the guy that used to own the Ducati? Who bought the Ducati all those years ago?
No, different guy. Different guy.
Right. I thought it was that Ducati.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, it'd be good. It'd be interesting to know how it goes when you drive 2 white GT3s back to back. Are you going to drive his car?
I'm just really keen to. I don't know. I'm not sure if we'll kind of do that, and no pressure. But I'm kind of keen to see what it's like. In terms of, I've got a rough idea of what he's spent on it. So, as we kind of keep talking, and I guess this podcast a little bit about that in terms of how the values kind of stack up. Just interested to sort of see the money versus kind of what you get.
And I guess it is value for money, and I can't speak for your friend, but it seems like he was tempted with that turbo, and the guy in the turbo went down a bit in price, didn't go down enough, but then he found this GT3, and obviously the GT3 is probably what he really wanted. And I guess with this buy, though, with the fact that if you're thinking about doing track work, which you said he may be wanting to do in the future.
Yes, I think he is. Yes.
And then the fact is you got a spare set of wheels, for the track. You've got a racing seat if you need it. You've got a harness, and you've got a cage as well, have you?
It's got everything. No.
No cage.
No, but you don't need the cage necessarily.
Yeah, so this was all part of the deal. And then if you get, let's say you only get, you get a $10,000 discount Australian dollars, or you get 15,000 off the asking, plus you get all these extra things, you can kind of see how you would go, okay, maybe I should just do this one. You know what I mean? Because it is a GT3.
Yeah.
I'm getting this stuff. Maybe it makes more sense. You know what I mean?
Significant price difference, to be really honest, though, like between a 996 turbo and a 997.1 GT3.
Yeah,
like
so you're probably looking at 70,
you're talking
60,
like at least
60 to 70,000 Australian dollars difference. So it's a big jump. So you have to have the funds
ready. It's a massive jump.
Yeah, it's a huge jump.
I wouldn't have necessarily thought, like, to be perfectly honest, that that you'd necessarily be kind of cross-shopping those two cars.
True. You'd think maybe you'd jump to a 996 GT3, but even then, a poor one is probably 150, a cheap one is 150, an expensive one is 180.
Yeah, well, and again, like, it seems like the prices are kind of going up. Like I noticed on the Porsche Forum Australia thing, they were commenting on my mate's car, like, and somebody just sort of said, "Oh, looks like the magic number now starts with a 2, not a 1."
They actually did comment about it? Because I did look on PFA.
Yeah, somebody said that.
I did look at it to see if it actually was there, and they were talking about it to see what they had to say. But I couldn't find it for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe it's in that thread.
There's only a couple of comments. Normally they sort of tend to they can be quite, put the magnifying glass over things, but there's only like 1 or 2 kind of comments.
Probably because it didn't last very long. Literally, I saw it come up, like you said, and then you said your friend was buying it, and then it was gone. So it really didn't last very long. That guy must have been very happy because he had a really quick sale, really like an easy sale.
If I was in the seller's shoes, then yes,
Yeah.
it was relatively easy because, like, if you kind of think about a whole bunch of other cars, they've kind of sat there for a very long time. But I think,
Still sitting there. Yeah.
again, price has a big kind of part to play in it. I think, I have no idea, it's not me, but I think if there are people out there that necessarily kind of put like a pretty high price on their car, expecting that they can be negotiated down, like pretend it was sort of like, you advertise it at whatever 270, but you're really happy to kind of take 220 or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with that as a tactic because I just think that you're going to eliminate too many people. But I noticed, like, on your Porsche chat, your recent Porsche chat, like, was it Greg suggested that, his point of view is that, like, if you have a relatively educated idea of like what it's worth, then just offer it, regardless of how different it is compared to the asking price.
I think that's my problem. I always get embarrassed with like giving lowball offers to people or doing it, but I know everyone does it, and I think Ajmal told me the same thing, that when he bought his 996, he offered the woman a lot less and said, if you don't want it, then I'll walk away, but it's up to you. And then she took it. You know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? I guess they can only say no, which is true.
And you don't know the seller's circumstances. I mean, I guess this is the same for anything. It's like a house or whatever it is that you're kind of selling. Even with the negotiation thing, my uncle was kind of just telling me a tiny little bit about, he bought his car from a private seller in Brisbane, and my uncle can be pretty hardcore when it comes to negotiating. Like, I've seen him in action, and he can get quite bullish with negotiating, and he went hard on his guy.
Did he?
I can't remember what he sort of said that his first offer in terms of how much of a discount, but it was hefty. And maybe I'm a little bit softer as a person. I wouldn't necessarily kind of go that hard, but
so the guy took the offer.
No, it was they didn't. I don't think they met in the middle as such. He still got kind of, I think it was like 12 or 13 grand off the asking price, which
still
is
pretty good,
again,
though.
like, pretty hefty.
Still pretty good. It means when you pick up the car, you can do certain things, like you can do the ceramic coating and you can do these things and think, well, I would have paid more for the car, so now it sort of makes up for it, I guess.
Yeah. It's just hard to say, right? Because, I think if you're sitting on no offense to like my uncle, but negotiating on a 991.2 Carrera S in PDK versus negotiating on a much rarer car like a 997.1 GT3, I'd assume that as a seller, you probably have a little bit more confidence in sort of sticking to your guns, depending again on like how hard you've gone with your price.
Yes, but the Carrera S, there's more
rarer.
of them. There's a lot more Carrera S's available, right? Well, so. There's not a lot, but there's more.
Yeah.
But I guess that's the thing, you have to, I don't know, you just have to be ready to walk away, I guess. I think that's with any of these deals with anything, right? You have to be ready just to say, just to walk away, whether you're, a buyer or a seller, you lose a sale or, you don't get the car you want. You just have to be ready. So
there's always going to be another one out there in both senses, like in terms of...
and you shouldn't really break your budget.
No.
Because you'll regret it afterwards. You'll feel bad about it afterwards if you really do go way over your budget. You will. You won't feel comfortable. You want to be comfortable with your purchase, and you need to like buy within your means, I think. I think too, like.
Sorry, I was just going to say, like, I think sometimes it gets very much about ego kind of thing. So it's sort of like this magical number, like when you sort of talk about your budget, everybody doesn't want to sound like they've overpaid for a car and stuff like that. But I think even if you never admit it to anybody but yourself or your wife or whatever, or like that's a bit sexist, or your husband if it's the other way around, but you have to kind of have some sort of number in your brain that is kind of your limit. And if you don't tell anyone else, that's cool. But as you sort of say, breaking that is probably a bit of a no-no.
Yeah. So let's just get into that. I don't even know what time we're at today because of the recording stopping and starting. I don't know where we're at, Steve. I don't know if you have. I don't know if we're at an hour yet.
I kept recording, mate. So
okay. So car hunting. Last week we had, what do we call it? Porsche hunting last week, was it? Was that the episode? Porsche hunting. Yes, Porsche hunting. So we're kind of continuing on a little bit this week, but
Yep.
So talking about how your uncle went through the process, you've got your uncle who's just gone through a process of buying something privately. You've got your mate who just bought a GT3 privately. Obviously, GT3 is a rarer car.
Yep.
What's the process though? Is there a simplified process? And we heard, like what Greg was saying about buying 996s and how he sort of looks at things. And other people in owner stories have also mentioned how they look at buying things like James, Porsche Platz, how he buys and sells. He doesn't want to spend too much money. He looks at the value. He really is on tune with the value. So how do you start it? You want to buy a Porsche the first time or even the second time because you made a mess the first time. What do you look for, Steve? I mean,
well, I reckon you and I are probably a little bit more aligned because, like, as an example, I think compared to somebody like James, who is maybe far more experienced, but I also think it might make a difference that he's a little bit more connected in terms of being able to kind of fix things a little bit more cheaply. So, and he's probably maybe a little bit more confident in buying something that might not be, kind of quite up to scratch. I think we might be maybe more like a sample of maybe like what other people might kind of be similar to. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, but I think you wrote down some pointers, and I think some of them are really important. And I think the main one is you need to be quick, like what you said. You need to be quick.
Okay. Yeah.
You need to be decisive. If you're looking at something like Steve just said before, if you're looking for a GTS, 0.1 GTS, which is still naturally aspirated, like what Barry has in the UK, or you're looking at a GT3, there are not so many available. People want them, so your bargaining power is probably going to be less. And
it's just so absolutely like you need to have all your ducks in a row. So you got to know where the money's kind of coming from. If once you've kind of gotten to the point, let's just pretend it's Michael with a GT3, like a 997.1 GT3, just to make it easier to talk about. In my opinion, at least, is that if you've kind of decided that that's the kind of car that you want, and they start kind of popping up, and this is the situation that I was in as well.
Yeah.
When the car, like in the ads and everything, is good and it's reasonable money, or if somebody's kind of highballing and you've kind of made contact and stuff like that, once you kind of have the conversations, you have the first few chats about, the history and all that sort of stuff, you need to start talking the talk pretty quickly, and you need to kind of be prepared to kind of put your money where your mouth is pretty much, and just, get to the point where you're securing it with a deposit to kind of then have it checked out properly if you're going to go down PPI route. But you need to be quick because there'll be other people kind of, looking at it too if it's such a good car and it's relatively well priced and all of that sort of stuff. And once you start kind of fumbling with finance and, having to sell other cars, like if you're in that situation where you kind of go, oh, I love this car and I'm really going to, really want to buy it, but I've got to sell something else first, you'll just get nowhere. And you'll just get really frustrated for years because I don't think you'll kind of be able to pick up the car that you really want because you won't be ready.
Yeah. And you're right. You have to be ready. You have to be like what you did. You have to say, okay, I'm not going to have my 911 for 2 months or 3 months, however long as it takes me to find my next 911, whether it be a GT3 or whatever. So you say the one you have the money ready, and you don't necessarily have to, not everyone gets PPIs. We've heard from owner stories that not everyone gets PPIs. Steve has told me that, people he knows who've bought cars recently didn't get PPIs. Steve even admitted that when he bought his 1M, he didn't get a PPI, Steve, correct?
Yeah, so
it
PPI
depends
is a funny
on the car,
one,
right? But let me just I'll just get to the point before you start. It doesn't necessarily, you don't necessarily, and I think I've said this before, we've said this before, I've said it before, you don't necessarily need a PPI to bargain the price, to get a deal on the price. You can still negotiate with the seller without a PPI. Obviously, the PPI would help if there's a big issue and you can say, well, I'm going to walk away if you don't fix this. The person could agree or they could not agree. But situations where you don't really need a PPI, Steve, there are some, right? You don't always need to get an inspection.
Oh, look, and this is obviously just, yours and ours opinion kind of thing. Like we both kind of go, oh, look, I would do PPI. And I think it's because you're talking about a decent amount of money. Like as soon as you're talking a Porsche, call it 100 grand Australian, so, or thereabouts. Like, to me, that's a hefty amount enough for me to kind of want some sort of surety. And I think also, albeit no guarantees, but also, I've lost my train of thought. Help me.
PPI. Do you need it to bargain? Do you need to get one?
Bit. I have really lost my train of thought.
What's the exception?
The exception. Sorry, the other bit was because people like you and I aren't that mechanically sort of savvy. Like, it's not like I could kind of crawl underneath a car and know what I'm looking at. So I need a hand for somebody to kind of look at things for me. That was the other kind of bit I was supposed to say before I lost my train of thought. The exceptions would be, in my books, if you're buying from a Porsche dealer, then like you'd want to, if you're doing a PPI on a car in a Porsche dealer, then you're probably being a little bit too kind of nervous or conservative, perhaps.
I think so, because it has the warranty as well. A lot of them have that warranty, and they also guarantee it for the 3 months anyway, right? On a used car, or they have a special warranty. By law. Yep.
Or if you're kind of buying from somebody that you actually know and you actually really kind of trust and know the kind of history, blah, blah, blah. But that means that there's a whole bunch of other kind of scenarios. Like, we bought my wife's car, the Macan, from a dealer. So it instantly kind of comes with a statutory warranty of whatever it is, a month or 3 months, I can't even remember.
Yeah.
But, it was a Jaguar dealer, so... What the hell are they going to do with a Porsche if something goes wrong?
Yeah, true. And I think the PPI, I think Greg said it in the last podcast, actually, in the Owner Stories. You get this list. It's a big list. You know what I mean? Some of the things, or we said it as well, and I think Greg also might have said it. There's a big list. That list could scare you away from a really good car. You know what I mean? You can't let
Absolutely.
You can't let the PPI with little things. You got to look at the list, and you got to look at these things and see, well, how much is it going to cost? Do I really need to do it? Do I really want to give up on this car, which is a good one, which, this 911, which may not come around again for a while, and this spec and this color, and the prices, like we keep saying. Because it's a used car. Yeah, and and it's a used car, and you have to bear in mind, if you're buying a 996, it's almost 20 years old. If you're buying an 02 or a 2006, it's 20 years old. A 997 is, 15 years old. My car's about to turn 15 years old. There's going to be certain things that are wrong with it. You know what I mean? There's going to be certain things you have to put into it, certain costs you're going to do. You can't just walk away. Yeah, you've got to be sure not to walk away from a good buy, because it can scare you too much.
PPIs can be really scary to read it, because, once you're starting to read, 3 full A4 sheets of, all this sort of stuff, you're paying somebody to kind of be quite fussy, but then you have to kind of filter the results as such. It can undermine your confidence as to whether or not you're buying a good car or not. But so I think there's a bit of a step in that where you also need to kind of have a reasonable conversation with somebody to understand what it means. And for example, if you're buying a car where the clutch hadn't been replaced, to be reasonable, a clutch is a wear item depending on the mileage kind of thing. So whether or not you can demand that somebody, pays for a new clutch, because, those sorts of things to me are kind of grey areas. In a lot of ways, I bought, use me again as the example with the Macan. I knew that the brakes were very, very well worn in terms of the pads and the discs. So I kind of had to factor in that, at the price that we paid, that I'd be up for $3,000 to kind of replace the brakes all around, within 6 months kind of thing. So it's only for you to kind of decide how that kind of sits with you, I suppose.
Yeah, and my PPI, as I said, had the thing about the brake pads being worn, and based on what Porsche dealer in Sydney had put on their inspection report that was done, that they'd had to be replaced straight away. They were now, they had to be done now. 4 years later, of course I'm not doing a lot of miles, but 4 years later, my pads are still fine. They're getting thin now.
Well, it was the same with the Macan.
But as Autohouse said, wait till that warning light comes on, and then you can change your brake pads. But if I would have walked away thinking, it's going to cost me $3,500, $4,000 in brakes, and then I got to change the aftermarket wheels, which are awful, that's going to cost me another $2,000, then I would have missed out on a really good car. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was exactly the same with the Macan. It came up as they were well worn in the PPI. I almost tried it on the dealer that they can't sell me a car with kind of worn brakes, because that's not legal kind of thing. But it turned out that it was just beyond the kind of measurements. Then our car was still in Porsche new car warranty, but it only had a couple of months left. So in order to renew the new car warranty, or to extend the sort of warranty, if we wanted to do that, the Porsche dealer wanted us to kind of change it. What happened? Like, they lasted at least another year, I think it was. So
it was over a year, right?
Years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, those sorts of things, I think, again, like, just the point in telling those stories is that if you were to read that on a kind of written report, you kind of start to kind of get a bit worried about it. You start to kind of add up all these numbers. But I think, there's just got to be a little bit of sense in the way that you kind of weigh it all up.
And I think the thing about not getting a PPI, and I think we mentioned as well, is that, if some people would just get if you get a service done, if the previous owner's got the service done and they have the service checklist, that service checklist will have outstanding items that need to be done. Do you know what I mean? If you go to someone who's good, like Autohouse, they'll say that your hinge on your petrol tank filler needs to be fixed. Your seatbelt, something's worn here, something's worn there. So a lot of people trust that instead of a PPI. Do you know what I mean? And I know some sellers, though, Steve, some sellers actually provide that, don't they? They say they had some sellers get a service done just before they're selling it, because I guess it does provide that list, a little bit of a list for someone to be more comfortable with purchasing the car.
So I think I was chatting to you on text because, like, you and I are both sort of more, like, I'd say we're pro PPI, for a Porsche particularly. But then I think I was saying to you, it reminded me, because I was thinking about it, even though, like, a couple of people I know recently didn't go PPI, which was, in my world, kind of fairly ballsy. I didn't do it when I bought the 1M, as an example. So that's sort of like an enthusiast, sort of fairly high performance car, blah, blah, blah. At the time it was, can't remember, it was about 60, low 60s Australian to kind of buy into it.
Right.
And I was thinking back about, in that position, like, normal me would go PPI. So how is it that I decided against it in that instance? From memory, I was buying the seller, who was fairly meticulous, and I think he kind of proved that to me by kind of giving me all of the receipts and all of the kind of history and all that sort of stuff. But I think from memory, one of the clinches was that the car had some warranty work done at like the BMW dealership. Right. And they picked out like a common fault in 1Ms, which was something to do with the injectors. And they'd also kind of picked up some other stuff which was quite finicky. So to me, that just sort of made me realise that the previous owner had kind of gone to the trouble to kind of pursue all of this sort of stuff, which then was proof that, the car was really well cared for. Right. Which then made me just kind of go, look, and that was in the last, year or two. And it was all documented. Like, I had all, like all of his kind of service receipts and everything. So I was like, you know what, that's good enough for me. I felt comfortable enough at the price that I was kind of getting that, I didn't necessarily have to go and spend the next $500.
It's what you said before, though. It's buy the seller, right? Isn't that what you say? Buy the seller?
Absolutely.
So that's a perfect example of it. And I guess, your uncle probably did the same thing. Your friend probably did the same thing. It's just feeling confident with the seller, correct?
Yeah. And I think you can just tell that from, like, of course, that's about trust. Like, the seller might be kind of like a great salesman and just sort of tell you a whole bunch of shit that you kind of want to hear. But you there are telltale signs, like, to me, there really are. Like reading through, like, the kind of service history. Like, I've kind of got every single bit of paper. I've still got it for my 964 and my 993. I offered to kind of give it to the kind of previous people as well if they wanted it. Yeah. But so, everything is completely documented with my car. Even, like, if I've had the front bumper kind of resprayed, I've taken a photo of what it was like before that.
Okay.
If you find somebody like that who's kind of open to share pretty much everything with you, then you just kind of know. And then I think, like, just in terms of general kind of car care, I can tell instantly from looking at somebody's side sills, the driver bolster,
which
the
shows
car mats.
gives you a good insight into their how they look after their car.
obviously everybody kind of rolls up. Everybody kind of washes their car, or maybe even has it professionally detailed to kind of take the photographs and all that sort of stuff. But if you go and inspect a car, say on a weekday, but it's a daily driven car, you can tell from the daily driven state, like if it's sort of like a, true kind of enthusiast or somebody who cares for their car, as opposed to somebody who's just kind of cleaning it up to sell it, sort of thing. I reckon you can pick it like a mile off.
Yep. And I think you're right. I think, the main points, before we run out of time, but the main points, is be ready for the purchase. You know what I mean? Have your funds ready, be ready. I mean, this is pretty basic stuff, really, So you're ready, so you don't have to walk away, that you don't have your finance ready, that you can negotiate better because you know what your budget is, you know how much cash you got in the bank from your previous car, you know how much extra cash you have, And the research, Steve, like you said, if you're not going to do a PPI, know your research. And if the car has a common fault, say the IMS with the 997, make sure you've looked into that. Yeah. Make sure you've, if you maybe in that case you want to do a PPI, maybe you want to do some other check. Whatever Porsche it is, there's always Porsches, whatever model, the 80s Porsches, some of them, the SCs have issues as well. I think James was telling me some of them you have to check out if they've had a top-end rebuild or something. All these things, you have to know about all these things. So you need to do your research and know what's going on and know whether
I'll tell you my other, my other little maybe sort of tip, or I tend to do it, so whether it's a tip or not, but I generally, like if you're kind of doing the dance and you're kind of courting a seller in terms of a car and you've kind of figured out the history, but you're trying to figure out, pretend it's a GT3, whether or not it's had its coolant lines pinned.
Yeah.
Or fixed at least.
Had your friends had that done?
I don't know. I think I asked him, but I don't know whether it has or hasn't been, which is one of the main things on a 997.1 GT3. What I've tended to do is, if I've gotten to the point where I know it's been serviced, like at a certain dealer or whatever else, perhaps with the seller's permission, or ideally with the seller's permission, but you kind of go, can I ring, the person that's been working on this car?
Yeah.
Generally, if it's say like a Porsche dealer, I did this with my GT3.
Okay.
I rang the dealership to sort of say, can you kind of just give me a quick rundown of like what warranty work was done on it, blah, 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 to kind of get an idea of the timing of everything, and particularly kind of warranty stuff like RMS on the GT3. And look, dealerships aren't supposed to kind of tell you that information. Obviously, it's kind of customer confidentiality and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
But if you prove that you're obviously, like, you've got the kind of VIN number, and I will ring somebody up and kind of go, look, I'm looking to buy this car and I'm just trying to check out its history and kind of figure it all out.
Yep.
Here's the VIN number, here's the rego number. What I really want to know is, has the coolant lines been pinned in the last, 2 years, or, whatever it is. They're not necessarily supposed to tell you, but I've found, like, a lot of the times that the service manager will be kind of willing to read out, what's been done, and I'm just sort of sitting there writing it all down, so I kind of know. Like, you can do your research and figure it out.
So it's best if you have the owner's permission to do that with their VIN, get their VIN off them and do the check. Yeah. And if they've only...
A good seller will let you, will kind of go, yeah, look, by all means, ring my mechanic or ring the dealership and, do your homework, because that's what I would do. I've done that many times and it's worked out quite well.
And I guess, when you see ads from dealers, even Autohouse Hamilton, they make the point that they've serviced this car for the last 10 years and they've serviced it over 3 owners. And I guess when you're buying from a dealer and they say that and they know the car, I mean, that is, do you need to get a PPI in that instance? Probably not, right?
Yeah, that's...
Probably not. I mean, it's a call you have to make. But I would probably say if it's a car that Autohouse Hamilton serviced and they put that down and they're willing to answer the questions, or whoever your Porsche specialist is, and they're willing to answer the questions, Steve, you probably go, well, maybe I don't need a PPI for this one. Maybe it's actually okay.
Yep.
Because you're going to take your car to them. You're going to service it with them. It's karma, isn't it? They have to be, they're not going to... You would think that whoever it is, they're not going to swindle you.
Yeah, to a degree, yes. But then, like, after all of this kind of things, like, look, PPI or not, there's no guarantees. You're buying a used car. There's absolutely no guarantees in any of it. So then the last bit is like just, maybe be prepared that you, like, if it was me, like my mate kind of thing, who just picked up the GT3, like, I think I did it myself. The first thing I would do is kind of go and take it to the mechanic just to kind of have a quick once over. At least, you know,
We'd
have
just
the
get
oil.
a service, didn't you? You would just get a quick service.
Just have
done.
the oil, the filters changed, all of that sort of thing. Get them to look at it. You know, depending on how conservative or non-conservative you are, like with the brake fluid, etc.
Is he doing that?
Have everything kind of done. I don't know. I'm not sure. I guess the answer is yes, but and like the worst thing that's going to happen is that, you know, like with my uncle or my mate's case, is that somebody didn't disclose something, or something is kind of potentially wrong with the car. But what's the worst that's going to happen? You're just going to have to cough up some money to have it fixed. But then you get to enjoy your, you know, brand spanking to you new GT3, and you're going to be grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah, and it comes back to the budget. You know, when I bought my car, I had a budget. I knew what I wanted to spend, and I knew when the price that I got from, and because I was paying cash for my car, I wasn't financed. And then I also knew that, you know, if I wanted to get wheels, they would cost about this. You know what I mean? I have I want to get the air conditioning unit. I knew how much it cost. You know, I have to get a major service done when I pick it up. I'm going to get the major service done. I had an idea of the cost, so I knew what extra funds I'd be up for. And I think that's the other thing you have to factor in, true, Steve. Like, your budget is just not your budget to purchase the car. The budget is what you want to fix once you pick up that car, what you want to do. You know, if it doesn't have aftermarket wheels, you want to change it.
Yep.
So it's going to cost me another, you know, 5 to 10 grand, or it's going to cost me 10 grand max. Okay, I have that money. I can afford that. You know what I mean?
Or you're thinking like for the first year, and then maybe the second year, you're thinking about your basic expenditure, like whether it's maintenance or kind of fun stuff. Like the fun stuff is obviously fun stuff, because that's when it becomes more like a hobby. And, you know, like it's a bit weird when you kind of factor like hobby money into maintenance money. To me, they're two completely different things.
Yeah. I don't think I've spent that much money on my car. I haven't really added it up. I don't think it's been that much. You know what I mean? Maybe
do
it's
a spreadsheet,
10,
mate. I'd love for you to do a spreadsheet.
Maybe it's been 10 grand. I don't think it's that much, really. Or maybe.
I did it once on my 993, and I scared the absolute shit out of myself. I can say it now because I don't own the car anymore, but
yeah,
I think I spent like 70 something on that car. Like,
just to put it into perspective, though, didn't you actually spend how many years of ownership was it? 903?
12.
12 years of ownership, you spent basically the cost of the car in maintenance and mods.
I didn't pay 70 for it, but I paid more than 70 for it. But yes, I poured an absolute bucket load of money into it. But see, like, that's the thing. When you hear somebody sort of say that out loud, that's not because it needed 70 grand's worth of money. But even like just the first bit is that doesn't mean that it was a bad car and unreliable or whatever. That's more because I'm a maniac and I was just stupid enough to kind of just wanting to keep playing with the thing. You know, like in the actual kind of physical upkeep and the maintenance that it required. Yeah. It probably, I think that was sort of more like probably 20 over 12 years, not 70.
Yeah.
The 50 that I spent was like, you know, wheels and like fooling around with like all these kind of extra bits that I sort of got enjoyment out of.
But that's why it's a hard question. You know, people say, how much in maintenance should it be a year? How much is it going to cost me? It's a hard question to ask. And I remember when I was looking at those Ferrari chat forums and looking at that they were talking about the cost, and some people were saying, oh, it's going to cost you $9,000 US a year on average. Then other people saying, oh no, it's only going to cost you $4,000 US a year. And then someone posted in the UK the price of a service for a cam belt service for a 3.2 GTS, and it was only something like £1,300 or something, you know, with the cam belt, which is actually £1,300. I thought a cam belt change on a Ferrari would have been, you know, $6,000 or $7,000. I didn't realize it was only £1,300. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you have to
be.
It's research, isn't it? It's research to know the costs of these things and and it's hard to say to someone, if I buy a Porsche, how much it's going to cost me each year? Well, it's going to cost you Rego this much. It's going to cost you. You know,
I think the other point to make on that though is that even maintenance isn't sort of like a definitive thing, because like, you know, Porsches leak, even the new ones, they still kind of weep oil here and there. So like if you want it to be absolutely kind of perfect, you're going to spend a shitload of money on it. But just because it's kind of got a little, you know, bit of weeping here and there doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it. Like if they all kind of do that, but they run perfectly fine, or, you know, like your little power steering weep, as an example, like I think they sort of said to you that doesn't need to be kind of fixed straight away. So you could kind of fix that 12 months time until it, like once it starts to leak properly and it starts to cost you bigger money. So it's all, it actually still, to me, I kind of say it a lot, a big factor in that is actually how fussy the kind of owner is.
Yeah.
I'd rate you as quite fussy. I think I rate myself as quite fussy. But there are people like that are willing to kind of, you know, that wouldn't spend the money on it.
Yeah.
So,
all right. I think we've run out of time. I just want to mention we're not going to get time to talk about the couple of other things we wanted to talk about, Steve. I think we're out of time. But I was just going to say, it just brings me back to the point of the GT3 video. And if you haven't seen it already, everyone should go and watch it. The one with Chris Harris, where he gets a view of the GT3. Last week we spoke about the Carfection one with, what's her name?
Catchpole.
But the Chris Harris one is actually his relationship with AP seems to be quite strong. It's a good video. Go and watch that. And also go and watch the Jay Leno and his GT Carrera video. Watch that one because it sounds absolutely amazing. But I just want to go back before we leave because we're going to go now because I think this is a really long one today because I'm seriously out of whack with the time here. No, I just want to say the GT3 AP Prutinger from Andreas Prutinger, who's the head of the GT department with all the GT3s, and it's in the Chris Harris video. And they're talking about the 991. And Chris Harris was very polite about it, about the issues with the 991 generation. Do you remember this? And, AP said, people thought the car was braking because there was this noise at a certain rev or something. Do you remember that part? He said when you get to a certain thing, there's noises.
He sort of said like in the last 1,000 revs.
Yeah, in the last 1,000 revs. He said it's not braking. He said it's not braking. It's just the noise the engine makes. And I thought that was quite good based on the fact that the 991.1 GT3 had the engine issues, and that's how he kind of just said it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you know
funny
that
you sort of say
that.
Yeah, sort of. Like it's actually similar. I think I've said this before with my car and my mate, who's obviously now getting to know his. He sort of mentioned that he had a funny little knocking noise from the front left strut.
Oh, okay.
And it reminded me. It's like, you know what? Like you jump into these cars and they make kind of weird noises from everywhere. There's creaks and there's kind of little rattles and there's vibrations all over the shop. Like. Particularly with GT3s, people kind of warn you that like that's just part of the character of the car, that they kind of just make all these kind of weird noises that you probably wouldn't accept in a C200 Merc kind of thing. But,
but is it the less sound? Is because they have less sound deadening?
Less sound deadening? Don't know. No idea. Mine certainly creaks in kind of weird places, and when you hit certain revs, like kind of other bits in the cabin resonate with it.
And also when you've got a roll cage like yours, you hear it. You do actually hear the roll cage. Yeah,
but it reminded me just when my mate sort of mentioned something about it. It's like, and what you just sort of said about AP and the last 1,000 rev range in a 991.1.
But I think when you first pick up your car, and like probably because he's driven it from Bathurst and it's a few hours drive, and I mean, I remember when I first picked up my car, it's like everything you hear, everything thinking something's wrong. What's that noise? What's that? What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that kind of thing, that nerves, excitement when you first get in your first 911 or your second 911 or your first GT3, and you go, what is wrong? What's wrong? And most of the times it's nothing, and anything. Most of these things can be fixed. Let's be honest, most things can be fixed at a cost, of course, but. What's the worst that can happen? I was going to say to you, that bit is, go back to my kind of fussiness thing. It's like, there's a funny kind of noise, but it's like, if that funny little noise is going to cost you like another $2,000, it's like, I think I'll live with it. Yeah. If that funny little noise is like when Steve's driving somewhere in the North Shore in Sydney and all the coolant starts leaking out of his GT3, and luckily it's close enough that he can drive it to Autohouse and finds out that he's got a big cost coming up. At least it can be fixed, right? Exactly. Bear that in mind. If you're buying a GT3, as Steve said, and you're buying a 997 GT3, you make sure the coolant lines have been done right. Yep. Because they have to drop the engine to fix it, so it's not a cheap cost. And when you're in there, you may as well do the clutch, right? At the same time. It's just what Steve did. And then you have to go and crack open the piggy bank. Yeah, and then your piggy bank is empty for a few months. All right. I think that's it, mate. Let's call it a day. Cool. Thanks for
All
that. Have a good week.
No worries. Yeah, you too. Cheers, man.
All right. Thank you. What else? That's it. Okay. I don't know where I am. I seriously am all over the place. Okay.
Don't you have to do your sign-off thing?
Yeah, I know. We're going to do the sign-off. Okay, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the PorscheCooled Podcast. We'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.